The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good morning and good afternoon. This is Mark Kovich. I'm a system specialist for IBM and for the IBM IoT Continuous Engineering team. Welcome to the live course panel, sharing successes and solving problems. We're St. Mary in Long Beach for our conference here. Today on the panel are a number of persons that are with our client and also IBM. Dr. Watson, who is our Senior Product Manager for Doors at IBM, Adam Hammett from HTI, Alex Ivanov from Raytheon, Peter Morgenthaler from BAE Systems, Ben Murphy, Data Plans Incorporated. I'd like to point out that what we'll do here in this live session is we're going to go through each person's bio for the panel. Rose is here. She's with the group and will be helping move driving the slides forward. I'd like a copy of the presentation that includes all of the panels information. You can download it immediately in the handout section of this webinar control panel. Just click on the plus sign that says handout and you can see that and you can get information right away. Or you can reply to my automated email later today if you'd like that information. Also, be posting in the chat window the URL website for the practical users group, so please look for that. So with that said, Nancy, you can go ahead and let the group know that we're starting and have them speak up and talk about their individual bios on each page.
Hi everybody, good morning. Welcome to this online webinar. So we've got some people on the phone. We've got getting on for 100 people on the phone, so quite a lot of people. And we've got some audience here in the room on the Queen Mary. So on the phone, welcome to the Queen Mary, where we're running our annual ICE conference, running many sessions around continuous engineering, doors next generation, the other IBM product range. And my name is Richard Watson. I'm the product manager for IBM's requirements tools. So that is doors next generation, a little bit of Requisite Pro. And I've been the doors guy for a little while, so hopefully if you've got any difficult questions, we'll try and take them. Luckily, I'm joined by, I think, about 60 years with the doors experience between four guys on the table here. And the format today is really just to try and give you the opportunity of learning from experience. So not my experience, I'm just the product manager, but the experience of people that actually really use our products. So the format today will be, I'll kick the session off with a few questions just to warm us up. And then in the room, if you've got any questions, there's some tickets on the table to fill the questions in. And there will be Morgan Brown's going to be walking around collecting your questions. And if you're on the phone line, please feel free to enter questions in the chat window. We'll try and get to as many as we can through just talking to the panel. Maybe some of them will answer directly online through the chat window. So welcome.
Should I interrupt you for a minute? Is it possible you can actually wear the headset because the sound quality is not that good? A lot of attendees are having difficulty hearing you. And also for attendees, I forgot to mention that after we're done with the slide.
All right, so I'll go ahead and introduce myself. My name is Adam Hammett, and I work for a company called HTI. HTI has been doing door support for 20 years now, and recently we've transitioned to jazz support as well. I also co-lead the Global Rational Doors and Door Next Generation user group. There's a card on everyone's table with information about that group. I co-lead that with Alex as well as Paul Lusardi, and looking forward to being here in the panel.
So my name is Alex Ivanov. I've been working for Raytheon ever since graduating college, so going on year number 17. I started using Doors on version 4.1. I've been a Doors administrator for about 15 years, software developer, so I've developed a lot of DXL. Currently lead the DXL development team at Raytheon, and I've been using CLM for maybe about 3 or 4 years as well.
Hi, I'm Pete Morgenthaler. I work for BAE Systems in Australia. Been working with Doors since about 2000, both as a user and then transitioned more into the administrative and training support side for Doors 9. Last 4 years, been doing the transition across onto the Jazz products and looking at Doors Next Generation.
My name is Kevin Murphy. I run a consultancy firm called Baseline Incorporated, and I've been doing doors. I did doors for about a decade, and then once IBM went to Jazz, I used that as the opportunity to learn PNG as well as RTC and ARC. I feel like I live and breathe this stuff, and hopefully all of us together we can help provide some guidance and different perspectives on the current situations we find ourselves in.
Very good. So let me start with just a few questions to the panel. But yeah, this session will work best if we have some of your questions. So if you have any questions online, type them in. And if you've got any questions in the room, just fill them in on that cue card, and Morgan's going to be just placing in the air. Morgan will come around and pick them up. If there's any questions in the room that are specific towards IBM, there's a different session at ICE later on called Ask the Expert, where we'll have a panel of IBMers. So Morgan might just give you a few cards straight back again and say later on. So guys, let me start. To anybody that fancies answering, can you describe any organisational barriers that you might have encountered, specifically with your users in adopting and rolling out a requirements tool in your organisation?
Why don't I take that? So I think one of the major challenges working for a big organization is that the users are experts in their own domain, but they're not necessarily true experts. And so there's a challenge of, well, do you really have the training budget? Possibly not. And so the challenge has been, how do you train the users just-in-time training such that they don't get overwhelmed? And so we found a lot of success in doing, or at least for myself, just-in-time training for various engineers such that we could have maybe a live workshop for just an hour. Like if they've got hit with the customer requirements document and they need to decompose that down to the system requirements, we'd have a 1-hour workshop directly on their project, and then I'd leave them and say, okay, a week later we'll do the next thing. So just-in-time training has been very useful. It might not be something you could do across every project at once, but that's been very useful to us to help people get going with doors.
I was brought in a few years ago to a company that had purchased doors, and we're about 6 months into the rollout. And it was a medical device company. The idea of systems engineering is new to medical device companies. The FDA started requiring traceability around the late lots, and medical device companies were kind of at a loss how to deal with that. So they just started standing up systems engineering groups. And so this particular company had purchased doors 6 months in, and they'd done the doors training. They'd had an admin, had really good intentions, but I get there, and I'm literally my second day, I was told incompetent. These users were hostile. They did not want requirements. They saw it as red tape. And they used to be able, these particular software developers used to be able to do whatever they wanted. They could document it later, and they didn't like, I guess, the new rigidness. And so after a period of months, I kind of had to re-persuade them of how this benefits them. This makes their job easier. Telling them things like, with requirements, you've got to put the investment up front so that at the back end, things are really much better. Finding out what their pain points were. And the guy that called me incompetent months later loved me to death. He realized he had complete control. He knew what was going on. And it becomes tough when an organization says, we're going to use doors and everybody, or any tool, you must do that. And people don't really like change. So you have to know the tool. You have to be a technical expert. But you also have to understand you're dealing with emotional people who are sometimes scared or just they don't change. And it really does help to go through some, really understand and listen to them, let them know that you're trying to help them out. That's the big.
Certainly within our organisation, we basically call them religious wars. This is my tool. This is what I use. Don't ask me to change. This is my religion. And people get very, very attached. And sadly, for a lot of people, that's Excel, and that's their requirements management tool. So trying to convince them to go across to a Doors 9 that is a tough ask. particularly when there's a perception that the usability of it isn't there. So trying to ask a non-technical user who understands Excel, can do a spreadsheet, can now use a technical tool, that's a tough ask. NextGen has helped us break down that barrier of usability to a large extent, so we're now starting to bring our non-technical users in. The engineers who can see the benefit, we can show them, yep, this is what it does. The technical people go, yep, I understand complexity, that's not a problem. But for our non-technical, our commercial, our finance people, they're the ones that we've really worked hard to get into NextGen and or get into a requirements tool, and NextGen has reduced that entry barrier, particularly from a training point of view.
And absolutely, and I would just add, large organizations especially are always resistant to change, and so trying to break down some of that resistance, what I've found, and I've heard throughout this week as well from other people talking, is try and find a champion or that bright person who loves new technology and train them to be an expert, so then they can train their own individual team. So in a way, you're training the trainer, and it can be a much more efficient process than trying to train, hundreds of people that don't necessarily want to learn.
So just a technical thing, I need to tell the audience, a number of the audience have been asking about seeing our pretty faces. If you want to expand the camera out, just drag the corners like an ordinary when you get a bigger picture. You guys in the room, you can have us as big as. So just to finish off that question, I obviously speak to a lot of customers, and one of the barriers that I see is it's a little bit like the religious war. People have their own tools and they have their own language, and they quite often deploy the tool, any tool, and just try and use it as it is, and they don't bother teaching the tool what their language is. So they don't try and put in their own information model. They don't rename a requirement to their types of requirements like functional functional gap or user requirement, or they don't bother defining that language. And that's a huge barrier to new users. When you use your own language, the barrier is removed. So on that line, can anybody say what benefits you've found with applying tool enforcement? Because that obviously adds, in some people's minds, barriers. But more than just tool enforcement, is there any example of where you leave gaps in that enforcement to give flexibility to your users?
Yeah, look, I'll pick that one up. In our Doors 9 environment, we tended to teach some very strict rules. You'll always link in these particular directions. There's good reasons for all of that. But without the training, users make mistakes, and it made it more difficult, and they felt in some cases they had good reasons to do it the other way, but we wouldn't allow them. So when we moved across the next generation, we defined certainly a lot of our schema stuff of all of our types and everything else, and we went through, we did an analysis on as many groups as we could find, so that's our commercial people, our engineers, our IT people, and said, what are the types of things that you'd want to record in a requirement store, and we predefined the schemas for them based on that. That was before we ever went and rolled it out. We then put link type enforcement on it, such that people didn't have a choice, but we made sure that was the thing that they were expecting to see. So when they finally came into the tool, they just go, I want to associate this high thing down to this low thing. Oh, that's the only link type. I'll use that one. So it stops them from making mistakes. But when we roll it out to the project, we said, here's the schema. We've defined everything. This is what we think you need to use. However, we will empower someone in the project that they can then modify the schema. The key on that is they can add to the schema. They can't modify the bits that we put in because we develop other processes around the things that we put in. So we allow growth onto the schema. So if you want to add an extra attribute, that's fine. You can't remove the ones that we've put on there. That's a rigid schema, but allows some flexibility.
Yeah, I just want to add on to what Peter said. That's really, really key to define a core schema. So you align that with your organization. So we definitely did that in Doors 9. We have a core schema for requirements, for verification, but then we say, well, we realize you might want to put additional information into Doors. That's another really important aspect. A lot of people, they think Doors, that's requirements, but really it's a lot more than that. If you have relationships between requirements and maybe standards or reference documents, you could put anything you want, but you really have to be cognizant about that link schema. And that's something you could really save your end users and engineers a lot of frustration. If you define the schema, for them and then explain this is what we'd like you to do. It just makes it much easier to do impact analysis, reporting, you name it. So just having a good starting point, and then, like Peter said, training the trainer, so to speak, that here's your project admin, here's how you can extend it should you need to. That's been very helpful.
One thing I like to do with my users is when things are new, there's no change management process, right? Create your document, be a creative engineer, think outside the box. But then once you hit that first baseline, then things have to be formally controlled. I think that's a pretty flexible approach. They can usually set with program management when the baseline is. They work that out. And also what we're talking about enforcement, it's easier in regulated industries. I find the challenges in industries that aren't as heavily regulated. Process and enforcement, technical enforcement is great, but people will always find a way around. It's like a cat and mouse game. They really want to do something, or the company culture allows them to break the rules, then they'll break the rules, no matter what technology exists. They'll figure out ways around. And so it really is a culture problem, and that can be harder to solve.
So guys, there's a question online actually, and forgive me, I'm going to paraphrase two questions. One of them, I've already written down before. Has any of you got any thoughts around how you work through the decision to use doors or the next generation? Before you answer that, I should add, I'm well documented. You've all heard me many times before, both physically and online, saying, IBM is not forcing anybody to use one tool or the other. Yours, and the Doors product is here to stay. Doors Next Generation is certainly not a replacement. But have anybody got any thoughts about your experiences in transitioning from Doors to Doors Next Generation?
Absolutely. We've seen several customers who have existing, Doors 9.5, 9.6 instances, very large, and they always ask, should I be going to Doors Next Generation? And it's a hard question to answer. It really depends on what they're looking to get out of their requirements management tool. If this customer is looking just to migrate all of their requirements exactly how Doors 9.5 does requirements management into Doors Next Generation, but there isn't a whole lot of reason to switch then, because you can just use Doors 9.5 to do that. But if you're looking to get the added benefits of streams and baselines and advanced configuration management, web-enabled tool, then absolutely making the switch to Doors Next Generation is the right choice then. So I'd say it's a case-by-case basis, but just to add again, or additionally, is if you have a Doors license and you're currently using Doors 9.5 or 9.6, you can use Doors Next Generation as well and try it out and see what you think and test it out before you actually go all in and make the switch.
So for our organisation, obviously we've been evaluating Next Generation for close to 4 years, and we've only really turned it on in anger in about the last 6 months.
In anger? I'm a bit worried about that.
Wasn't quite meant to be or angry about it anyway. Our decisions when we look at projects, when a project asks, do I need to move across there, we kind of apply a couple of things. So our business case for moving to Next Generation was focused around greenfield projects only, so new projects starting up that don't have any legacy data. We identified the cost to migrate is not insignificant. There's a lot of work that needs to go on to clean up old data to bring it across. So the general direction we go is new projects, you'll start on Next Generation. Old projects, if they're currently running fine on Doors 9 and they don't have any particular issues that's inhibiting them from doing their work, they're going to stay on Doors 9. We're not going to add a cost to them just to go onto the latest and greatest thing. However, if you've got a program that has shortfalls in their processes that they're using for Doors 9, and we'll look at a path of probably doing a hybrid approach. So maybe when they reach a milestone within their project, they'll now switch across and start the next milestone in Next Gen in parallel with their Doors 9 and link across the two. Work over a period of time, and then eventually decommission their 9 and then run all in a Next Gen. So that's our way of covering that kind of use case.
One point I'd like to make is I think you should ask the question every year. Because the tools, the JAS tools especially, and especially BNG, if you start looking at the change log between releases, it's huge. The D&G devs put in a lot of work. Just look through, again, any change list that's new. So one example is, again, in a tightly regulated industry, there's a Doors 9 to RTC integration that will allow you to basically lock down your modules. You cannot make a change to a module without having an RTC work item in so, and then that work item then has to get approved, and then you do the comparison. And then once it's approved, the change gets made. A year ago or so, at least in ANG 5.0 to 5.02, there was no concept of change set in Doors Next. So a year ago, if we needed that, okay, yeah, that's a deal breaker. You should stay on Doors 9. But today, that's not necessarily the case. There are change sets you can make to work items, have more processing force. So I think that we're not going to settle this question today. Like our opinion today may be completely different in 6 months to a year because they are so many.
I just want to follow on to what Kevin is saying. I think that's very, very important because I primarily work with programs using Doors 9 because we have a lot of customizations built in. So we use Doors 9 for requirements and verification. But having said that, for the past year, I've actually started demonstrating Doors Next Generation and really the screens capability. Because in my mind, having written a lot of DXL, the one big strength to Doors Next Generation is really the variant and kind of the parallel development stream. So I've definitely had a lot of challenges in Doors 9, and so I think for anybody that's trying to do parallel development, maybe working a couple of releases at a time, or maybe you're building a product line, that's really why you should be looking into the D&G and the CLM solution. I think that's really the big strength.
So you scratched on something that is a question from the audience. We hear all sorts of strange stories about people using Doors or a requirements tool for all sorts of interesting things. I think some of the stranger ones I've heard is somebody planned their wedding activities with Doors. I'm the speaker in the room nodding at it. I had a friend that planned the renovations of his house. He had a module per room, and he even linked dependencies between it. Oh dear. So professionally, can you explain any other professional reasons that you're using Doors for other purposes, just writing
So this is probably not as exciting as wedding planning, but one thing that we do use Doors for is a couple examples. So one is we've actually taken the documentation for how we use Doors 9 at Raytheon, and we've put that in as a separate project. So we document like the schema, document the process, we document the menu items. And earlier on, we used to do that just kind of as part of your project template, but then we realized, well, the schema is the same. I mean, we do change it from release to release, and so that has saved us a lot of time and frustration. By putting that into a separate Doors 9 documentation project, it makes it very easy to deploy to various parts of the organization. So that's been very helpful. The other thing we Doors admins have used, again, modules for is really to document kind of the administrative tasks. So that's something we found to be very helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. We use Doors to document DXLs. We have so many DXLs running around that we use to help our customers with that it's hard to keep track of what's the current version, which DXL actually works or doesn't, which one needs to be improved. So we use just the classic Doors module to keep track of that.
We have some more unusual uses of it. So we use it, and we're transitioning towards this, and we'll publish all of our documentation from Doors. So we can do things like put multiple languages in attributes, and then we can just tell it to publish the German version, publish the English version. We can get reuse of common parts of documents down across there, so we can actually use it as a document generation tool. The other more unusual one that we use it for is, instead of thinking of things in next generation just as requirements, think of them as objects, and using it to track the relationships between objects. So one such example is an IT architecture. We put our servers in there, we put our applications, we put our operating systems, and link them all together, and then we can do impact analysis on show me what happens if we need to upgrade Red Hat 6 or 5 or whatever it is. We can see all the servers that are affected, and so end users or IT people can just go and quickly find out the information rather than having it on a wiki page or in an Excel spreadsheet or whatever it happens to be.
One of my customers, I was working with an engineer who was working on a wireless protocol, transmitter, receiver, message lengths, and this message with this length and these byte characters in it. And so I worked with him to make a structure, and if he followed the structure, it worked beautifully. It would just basically auto-calculate the message length, so he could change the actual byte order and see where the message began and end, and he could dynamically put it together over DXL attributes that I was able to do it, and that was fun. And the other thing I did once, I did a paper on it in 2007. One of my customers was, they had misconfigured doors that have the home drive on the network where the door's home was. They would then update the clients locally. So weird things started to happen. And the IT people could not, they couldn't control it from the back end, and they couldn't visit everybody. It was a large campus. So I wrote a process where they'd open a module, the registry updated, and it solved like 90% of them. So I use doors to update doors, which is really strange.
So on that topic actually, and there's a whole bunch of questions about this. Can any of you share experiences? One of the criticisms that Doors Next Generation has is it doesn't support DXL. And I know there's probably 60 years of Doors experience and 60 years of DXL experience here as well. Have you got any thoughts about that criticism? So I could answer, but I'd rather not. I'm a bit biased doing my job time. Experiences in how you customize Doors Next Generation anyway, and do you share the concern that Doors Next Generation not have DXL? Is there anything you can say about that? You don't have to just give good answers, to be honest.
One of the key risks that we've identified within our organisation is DXL. It's a liability for the organisation. It's unmanaged, it's unstructured, and it's very difficult, at least within Australia, to get people who know how to program it. We can't buy it out of universities, we've got to train it in-house, and there's a lot of risk associated with it. It's probably the easiest way. And so across our company, we've probably got 3 DXL experts that we rely on. We have a fairly large liability of if they get hit by a bus, and we've got all of this unmaintained DXL. So for us, one of our primary drivers is to get away from our reliance on DXL and at least move on to another scripting mechanism, whatever that happens to be. What we've found moving across Doors Next Gen is most of the common questions a user goes, well, I used to do this in DXL, why can't I do this in Next Gen? I said, well, you don't need to because it's built-in functionality. So it takes the liability of us as developers maintaining it and puts it onto Richard's team to go and put that functionality as base functionality. And it's not all there, but probably 60 to 80% use cases are covered by built-in functionality. Or we ask the question, why on earth are you actually doing that? Is that actually a smart thing to do? Because quite often it's just bad practices that have been propagated from 10 years ago, and we just go, you're not actually value adding by doing that. So, yeah.
So Alex, I know that you've got extensive DXL.
Yep.
Yeah, so I was going to say it's a slightly different perspective. So being a software developer, I'm actually not concerned about the DXL breaking, and I get the question all the time, what are we going to do, Alex, when you leave? Well, I'm not leaving yet, so don't need to worry about that. But really, I'm not as concerned about the DXL breaking, or one of the questions is that, well, what happens when there's a new release? What happens if it goes? I've been with Doors since version 4.1. The DXL we've written has withstood probably 50 different releases. It's not going to break anytime soon. But having said that, I am not interested in customizing DNG. Yeah, let me repeat that. I am not interested in customizing it because I do see the speed of development with which IBM puts out new functionality. And so I think one of the things that if you're trying to get away from customization, then why would you jump into DNG and start customizing it all over again? So I really recommend actually working with IBM. I think it's really cool that you can log into jazz.net and actually see the development of the various tools. You can chime in for free, just put in your 2 cents. So I think it's important to work with IBM and really help shape the future. And again, really the programs you're working with, you just have to ask what makes sense for them. What are they trying to do? So depending on what they're trying to do, that's how you can cater to them and find that out.
Selfishly, I wish we were more customizable for admin type cleanup work. That's where I would rather do something, I guess, more front-facing tool than having to maybe write some Rust script in Python just to clean up bulk operations. They have limitations, right? And there's reasons. I understand that, but you know, I don't want to customize the tool, but there's a difference between customization and enhancing. That's a fine line. So the widget, and I wish it was a kind of better documented, and that I could troubleshoot. There's a lot of work just getting a custom widget up and running. There's a lot that I know. At least with Excel, I could just print this. The other problem is, well, Alex may not want to customize Doors Next Gen, the users probably will eventually. And so I think this is a complicated topic. I've had to work on some competition tools, that are more extensible, and the back end is terrible. I don't trust it. Things can break a lot easier. I've had object ID in these competing tools actually be overwritten. That already, like, you run into some bad stuff, and users care about the end result without caring how the sausage is made at times. And one thing I do respect about the IBM stuff, at least in the back end, I feel like, hey, they got me, and I can open a ticket with support if I have an issue.
Just to be on record, just to explain to the audience, both audiences, so given your answers, have you got any idea of, indoors, how extensive your DXL would have been? How much DXL do you have? No, Alex, for example, I know you've got loads. So you said you don't have as much of a concern without having DXL in DNG. How much DXL do you actually have indoors?
I think we have a lot. So in essence, I started developing DXL in 2002. So 14 years later, I'm still enhancing the same DXL libraries. So in essence, in short, we're at about 150 custom menu items. And we cover, as I mentioned, not just requirements development. We got a complete verification backend, change management, reporting, impact analysis. So when I look at DNG, that's just part of a solution. So for like the clients that I currently have, which are programs at Raytheon, we wouldn't be just saying, hey, DNG is one-stop shopping. It would be the whole entire CLM suite, NJRS, and publishing engine. So it's the complete package.
Yeah, I would add we probably have around 100 DXLs that we utilize, but only about 20 to 30 of those are ones that we use often enough that they're absolutely necessary. The big difference is when you go to DNG, you find that a lot of those DXLs you no longer need to use because the tool's web-enabled or the functionality that the DXL was doing is already built in. And the last thing I would add is that if people really have DXLs that they're tied to, I mean, it is an option that if you were in a pinch and you had to use a DXL and you're using DNG, you could take your data, put it indoors, and still run that DXL to get that analysis done.
I think also, I think we're talking about actual scripts, but there's attribute DXL that does calculation, based on triggers. That's missing in DNG. And IBM's got, they provide it for free if you look at the Doors extension. They go in risk management. I've got medical device clients, so that extension is valuable. But of course, no client does the risk management the way that IBM does it. It has to be customized. And one issue that I have is you can't force a user in DNG to go through an extension like you can with a trigger. So, I'd like to see, I guess, some calculated field. That's another type of Excel. And I think that kind of customization is perfectly acceptable because it's not really changing the workflow of the tool. It's more about what we want the tool to do for us.
So there's an interesting question here. So for programs where you've moved users from Doors to Doors Next Generation, does anybody have any examples of a hybrid approach where you've got programs that you still have users in Doors talking to people now using Doors Next Generation? Or do you just have a clean split and only have people using one tool, not spanning?
So we have programs that run a hybrid approach, so that we base around the milestone. So that might be on a different stream that's going to stay at Doors 9, and there's a couple of reasons. And another team who's starting up on that next thing start it up on next gen, and yeah, they will link across the two. Yep, that's certainly a case, and it's a valid way to allow us to slowly transition across.
I work with an automotive supplier who's in Doors Next Gen, well, I'm sorry, an automotive company, but then the suppliers are in Doors 9 a lot of times. So there's some rapid transfer, and sometimes it works well, other times, because there's so many different versions of Doors 9, that not everybody's always on the latest and greatest, so certain things don't always come over. So there's a little bit of pain. Sometimes I have to go from our DNG to our Doors 9, export a DPA or a DMA. And so working with outside vendors can be challenging at times, but it's something that can't be overcome.
So for people on the phone line, my apologies about that audio. I'm kind of hoping we've got some new hardware, as hopefully you can see on the video inside. So earlier you were talking about the fact that Doors Next Generation has configuration management. Are there any other benefits that you see getting out of Doors Next Generation over Doors? It sounds like a one-sided conversation in the room. I apologize. I'm not trying to persuade everybody to move to Doors Next, but there does seem to be a lot of interest around Doors Next Generation in understanding that if it's just another requirements tool and you don't get any more benefit, well, then don't move. So obviously you must have seen other benefits. Configuration management is very compelling. Is there any other things that help you make your decisions?
JRS.
Yeah,
JRS. Amazing. The fact that it's user-facing and that people can experiment and quickly get metrics. JRS is kind of a hidden gem because it's very new still. It's relatively new compared to the other tools. The fact that I don't have to really train people on JRS. It just point them to where the server is, let them know it exists, and they can have at it. There are some caveats because of module structure and things like that. There may be certain reports that can't be done, but for the most part, JRS is it's amazing. I really like it.
Probably the other thing that we really get out of not only Doors Next Gen, but the whole CLM environment. What we used to do is we used to do a lot of the whole CLM just inside Doors 9. So we were using the requirements tool to do our testing and our traceability between requirements and testing. By moving it out into Doors Next Generation and RQM and then RTC to do the defects or whatever defect tool you're using, we're now using the right tool. So we're using RQM, which is a testing tool, so we can get all the benefits of using the testing tool for testing. We focus Next Gen on primarily the requirements management piece of it, and we've got good linking and traceability between them, which is what drove us to do everything in Doors 9 in the first place. So we're now getting the added benefits of using the right tool for the right job at the right time.
I would say just being web-enabled is a huge benefit. Now you don't have to have that client on your machine. You could be in a conference room where you've never logged into before. You can log in and see your requirements if you needed to in a pinch. The other thing is ease of use. We had customers who basically had Doors experts on site just to manage Doors for them, just because it was a little difficult for people who weren't experienced with the tool to use. Versus Doors Next Generation, it's completely different, where everyone's in the tool collaborating, everyone enjoys the tool and agrees it's making their life easier. So that's a huge shift from before where you had a few people doing the Doors work to now the whole entire team is in the tool working.
Yeah, and one of the things I'd like to add is, so although I have yet to work with a Raytheon program where we're using CLM and DNG, I've been using the CLM suite to manage the development of the DXL. That's actually, I've got a talk at 2 o'clock later on today for those of you local on my experiences with the CLM suite. So I kind of, as the development lead, I really like the DNG capabilities for the diagramming, and definitely as far as using RQM and having the traceability to, okay, we've implemented this new enhancement. Now let's go execute the test case and see how it all ties together. So I'm very much enjoying using the CLM suite from keeping track of the development perspective.
I have to say the importer, both the Word importer and the Excel importer, are a huge improvement of getting the requirements in Next Gen. So our users are actually able to use that now, not too many issues.
So there's an interesting one online again. In your early days of looking at Doors Next Generation, we know that the Jazz Foundation sits on a relational database. So you have to install a database. You've got to have an application server, and the server infrastructure could be extensive. It's up to you guys, right? Is there any experiences in the early days of looking at Doors Next Generation of trying out Doors Next Generation without actually getting into the too complex server installation and configuration to make it less daunting?
Absolutely. I mean, when we first tried Jazz and Doors Next Generation, we were deploying it on the laptop you see here, and it was running just fine for just testing things out. And that was actually quite useful because you didn't need an internet connection. This was acting as a local server, and we still do that when we can't get internet connections. So that is just an example of how small the footprint can be. Like you said, for large enterprise customers, and when you're starting to have to deploy across multiple servers, it can grow, but it doesn't have to start that way.
Yeah, and I'll just add that, yes, in the early days, kind of doing the betas and the early access, I was able to install the server myself. But now, thank God I have an IT team. Some of them are sitting in the room here. So from an engineering perspective, it's tremendous to have basically the solution deployed for you, because then you can focus on kind of the end user and the program. So I think it's very, very important, again, to get the topology and all of that stuff right, such that you get the right performance. Because I think it was mentioned throughout the conference that if you are introducing somebody to a tool and things are slow, that's a real big deal breaker. So you've got to make sure that it's responsive.
I have to say, sort of, DORS 9 was a relatively straightforward style install. So moving into next gen, we had a fairly steep learning curve, learning all of the new technologies, database, the web, the WAS server, getting the Java in there, getting all of that set up for production. Yes, to install on the laptop, you hit the Express install and install. That worked great. To take that next step and actually design the topology took significantly more effort and quite a few false starts for us. So our lesson learned was we really needed to push back on IBM earlier to get that information out of them. It's now more publicly available, but if you're doing that path, ask for scaling options. Yeah, it's aimed to retrofit it, which we're doing.
I should put my IBM hat on and also mention that Doors Next Generation is available in the cloud, so you can try out basic installations of Doors Next Generation online on a website called jazz.net, but also IBM actually offer Doors Next Generation through cloud services. So if you want to remove the overhead of that deployment, either to try the product or even to actually use the product in production, then consider cloud services, because they're getting extremely popular. There's a significant shift in our industry to go back to hosted solutions. So I've got a question from the room. It's a very short question, so I'm going to expand it. Actually, you'll have to forgive me. The question that came out was, does anybody use DNG in a closed area? But I'll expand that. Do you have any experience? Because I know the answer is yes. Do you have any experiences on whether it's more difficult or more arduous in deploying DNG in closed areas?
So until you added the second part of the question, I was going to say yes, I can answer. So I don't deploy DNG, as I mentioned, just an IT handles that. I do know that that's one of the strengths we've seen a lot of benefits from Doors 9 on, the ability to create an archive of a module or a project, just drop it into a different database. So that's one real big strength of being able to take data across different boundaries. So I don't have any experiences with having DNG on two different networks, but that is definitely a use case that we are very interested in, and having programs that have an open area, a closed area, parallel development, and the ability to bring things not just from DNG, but maybe requirements linking to test cases and bringing that over and so forth. So that's a really important use case for us.
Yeah, I would add, from what I've seen, it's really no different than any other tool you would deploy and use in a closed area. You have to figure out if you're going to be installing your own help versus reaching out to the web for your help, of course, things like that. But no, it operates just as you would expect.
So our experience is a little different. So we tend to find in our closed area we don't have all of the infrastructure that we would have on our unclassified area. So in our unclassified area, we've got big Oracle data centers and whatever else we go and use the database for. When we go into our closed area, it's typically lower cost and just the exact things that they need to operate in that area. where we find that, yeah, we'll have to switch from Oracle in our unclass to an SQL server in our classified networks. Transition is not too hard, scripts are a little bit different, but generally install process is the same on both sides, so no issues there. You do have some concerns of getting the data across. We can get the doors data across, we can get the IQM data across, and get that and all the linking across. So that's, we still feel it's a bit of a shortfall there.
So there's a question from the room. It says, for those who migrated from Doors 9 to the NG, how long or difficult has it been to transition your users? Are there any tips or lessons to do that?
Set expectations. Even though it's called Doors Next Generation, it is not Doors 9. It is not. There's no feature parity. There will never probably be feature parity. It's not one of the goals. I did a client a few years ago. They jumped in head first, and so it's one thing when you evaluate, but then when you go to production, and again, head first, we did like about 60, 70,000 requirements, and there's no going back. Then they started realizing some of the things they used to have that they no longer had, and there were complaints around that. And so you can do an extended evaluation. I spent as much time. I spent as much time kind of at the beginning, kind of siding with the users and bashing IBM as I did defending IBM. And guys, this is different. It helps to keep in mind that people are passionate about the requirements. Nobody likes writing them. Nobody wants to volunteer to do it. It's boring work. But the people who do it then become passionate, and they see any perceived loss of functionality. They take it really personally, and they do exaggerate. It's not like you can't do your job anymore. It's just a little bit different, and it is the religion.
As a trainer, I do all of the training, and two distinct groups, those who have used Doors 9 and those who haven't. I would prefer to train those who have not used Doors 9, where they will adopt and they will move in there 100 times quicker than the Doors 9 users. For the Doors 9 users, I need to show them the carrots of what they're going to get extra that they don't get in Doors 9, or how it's different and easier for them. I have to do far more convincing that this is a good thing for them, because yep, they're losing their DXL, they're losing their safety blanket, they're losing the security in their job eventually, because they were that DXL expert and they owned that project. They're the hardest ones to really have to show them what the benefits are. They're the hardest ones to change the mindset of as well.
I'd just like to add, so although I haven't moved programs from Doors 9 to DNG, I, like Peter, do a lot of the training. And so one of the things that's been helpful is I actually have an internal YouTube-like training channel at Raytheon. And so it's been very helpful to record myself, so if I get a question from maybe somebody that's interested in DNG, I've actually recorded a couple of videos where I'm like, okay, let's go through this example, we'll record what we're doing, and then I make it available on the channel. So that's received tremendous positive feedback from the engineers that they have a video to recall whenever they want as a refresher to whatever it is they need to do. So I'm a huge fan of creating little training videos for just about anything you want to do.
I put links to my training videos right on the dashboard of the project. So help is right there.
And I would share Peter's thought on existing Doors users. You'll find Doors users will switch over to Doors Next Generation, and then they're looking for objects, and then they're confused, where are my objects, and you have to really sit down and explain, this is completely different. There's artifacts, folders, modules, this is what they do. Here's streams. So you definitely have to spend a little more time with the existing Doors users to show them how this functionality will make their lives easier, because ultimately that's what it's going to get by on and get them to love the tool. And then for new DNG users, absolutely, you'll find it's a pretty easy transition versus if they're learning Doors for the first time, because it's web-enabled and things are very intuitive if you've never worked with the requirements management tool before.
I guess one of the challenges we're now starting to discover is when we run our training, we now not only have to do it for Doors, we now have to do IQM, we now have to do the RTC, we now have to do global configuration management and stream. So we don't just train a Doors user anymore, we now train a CLM user. And so we find the users now going across all of the tools, doing little bits in all of the tools rather than just doing on the requirements first. But that's a significant change for us culturally, and it's a burden for training. You get a better end result, but there's a lot of extra work required to switch between the tools. Still working out how best to deliver that. One big chunk doesn't work.
And it can be overwhelming. It's another thing to keep in mind, especially when you've got a new user who maybe never used Doors 9 and they're new to the company, and you do have those links to RTC and RQM. I mean, I did training and I had a user, and very smart. I mean, they're engineers, but she asked me, she's having a problem in Doors, and I go over to RQM. So yeah, that's a big problem. So again, she was just clicking on links, thinking that she was. You're used to just being in the same tool, and they do kind of look the same. I don't blame her, right? And so it's really hard to emphasize, okay, here's where you do your requirements, and here's a tool that looks very similar that's for test cases. It's a challenge.
I've got a question here online. With our industry investing less in dedicated training courses, we're expecting people to just pick up tools by themselves and self-learn. Have you got any experiences on how you teach your new users? What techniques do you use? How much time do you expect it to take, etc.?
I really believe in training the trainer. Finding that key person or person who just loves learning new tools and teaching them and making them an expert so that they can then just spread the wealth of knowledge exponentially. There's a huge benefit where you have somebody working among the team, a cubicle over, and they can share ideas off of one another rather than trying to hunt down the one trainer in your organization. So that would be my suggestion that I've seen work very successfully, is try to train the trainers for every team, and that way they have their own resource that can share knowledge among them.
What we've done, we have distributed teams, and we just can't run the courses for the whole enterprise at the same time. So I've gone through and just recorded little snippets, 30 seconds, how do I browse modules, how do I do this? I just have all of these snippets up on a similar channel, and I've just got them there, and if the user's got a question, they can go there first. I might have done the training course and forgotten. They just need a quick refresher on it rather than going through 1,000 pages. They can just have a quick look at the video, click, oh yeah, that's where it is. So that's our way. So they can have real-time training if they need, or refreshers as they go along.
One tip I have for people in the room in our position, hammer the features. It doesn't matter if they don't know how to use the feature, just that they know it exists. I was at a company that purchased RQM because of the integration, tight integration with PNG. In case you don't know, RQM can automatically create empty test cases with links back to every requirement in your module. It does it automatically. So you've got your traceability from the start. You just have to fill in the data. And that's why this client bought the tool. Yet 6 months later, I had people asking me, I've got 100 requirements here, and I'm having to create a test case for each one and link back. It's like the reason we bought the tool was so you didn't have to do that, and they're complaining to me, do you have any tips? And I showed them, and their minds were blown. So hammer over each, like, you can do this, because they're not going to remember everything that they do in training, because they're not going to maybe use it for a month or two. But if they remember, oh wait, there's some sort of automated way to do this, then you can save them a lot of effort. Another thing is that I find that younger engineers don't like asking for help. I can figure it out myself. I grew up with computers. They don't like, I'm sorry, but can you help me, Kevin? And it's like, this is my job. My job is to help. Don't be sorry for approaching me. You're keeping me in business, yeah? So, I think hammer the features. Like, this is what the tool can do for you.
Yeah, and I like Adam's suggestion of training the trainer, because that's really, and so I mean, I have very much an open door policy. I recommend people stop by. I've almost created this air of invisibility. A lot of people think, oh my God, Alex, you're so busy, I can't reach out to you. I'm like, no, just stop by. And I have a really keen eye for those people that express an interest in learning. Because I'm like, well, I'm going to teach you because I know you're going to teach others. And so, as I already mentioned, the training videos are great. The other thing that's really helped myself and my users is that once I have the videos, I also do quite a lot with social media internal to Raytheon. So I've got a wiki page and I've got blog posts. So once I have the video in one location, I can embed it in other channels. And so that's just other means of communicating out to the community and say, hey, there's some new features that just got released, and I include links to videos. So that's been very helpful.
Sorry, I'm smiling because I've got a question online that I'll tell you what the question is, but I don't want you to answer because I don't think we're allowed. It says, how does D&G perform against its competitors like GTC? But we shouldn't answer that.
No, it's the best. It's 100% the best. You buy it, right?
I haven't used any competitors' products, so I wouldn't know.
Just send your purchase orders to Richard.Watson. And here's a question you can answer. So I'll read it out. It says, data is often useless unless you can get it out of the tool. Do any of you have any experiences of using reporting? And that's with DOORS or DNG. So it's physical reporting in terms of documentation, or maybe it's metric reporting to monitor.
Well, so this is definitely one of the huge areas where we've invested a lot in the DXL that we developed for DOORS Classic. So we definitely have the metrics is one of the first things that managers want to know about. So I think it was echoed earlier that JRS, Jazz Reporting Service, looks really awesome. I mean, I know having developed a lot of DXL throughout the years, the Jazz Reporting Service looks like something that has a very small barrier to entry and lots of people can get started with it. So I see quite a few features in there. But so in our case, we have used DXL to develop basically both the metrics, the impact analysis. We even have a publishing capability. It's very similar to Publishing Engine. But yes, that's a very, again, if you didn't have the DXL, I'd be the first one to tell you that you really should look into JRS and RPE because those are good solutions.
Absolutely. I mean, JRS is a great tool. It kind of flips the way reporting was traditionally done. You know, traditionally you have a reporter that builds the reports for you, and they're the expert, and you have to ask them to, hey, I want this report. JRS is really cool because any user can just go in and use JRS to build the report they want, and it's very easy to use. Another tool is Rational Publishing Engine, RPE. That's a tool that works with Jazz as well as DOORS. Extremely powerful. It has a much steeper learning curve. Typically, you're going to have an RPE expert that's building those reports for you, but extremely powerful tool where you can really bring the data out however you wish, as long as you spend the time to build the report how you want it.
Probably the biggest thing for the reporting and getting the data out is having the schema in the first place. And so by enforcing our schemas both in DOORS 9 and in NextGen, we've now written generic templates that we can point to either data source and publish our documents in a standard way. So we can get the data out, we only write one template, and it does 90% of our use cases. The JRS, yeah, absolutely. Also the export to Excel and do the round tripping, great way to get the data in and out. And I talked about the word importer as well, so another great way to get the data in. So,
I'll go further. In my opinion, I believe that getting the data out and reporting is a huge advantage to going with IBM. So especially with that last question about comparing it to other tools, yes, RPE has a steep, it is a cliff. You are scaling a cliff. But if you understand how it works and you learn a little bit about how REST works and you choose whatever programming language you like, you can get anything out of the tool that you need. One of the limitations of JRS is with dealing with modules. In DOORS 9, you could write a DXL which says, I want to see all requirements at level 4, and then I want to know how many of them are traced to something else. In DNG and JRS, you can't do that, and RPE isn't an appropriate tool. But I was able just to write a REST script in Python, and I gave it to a user and forgot about it. 8 months later, I see on a big 47-inch TV on the wall metrics based on what the script I wrote. They just took the metrics out, put them in graphs so that everybody walking by could see real-time traceability. So I will say IBM is superior at letting you get your data out in any way you want. Yeah, you may have to research, you may have to learn a little bit about something that doesn't work out of the box, but that is a distinct advantage that these tools have.
probably not quite an export style thing, but the Realm product for allowing you to do impact analysis across all of the tools is another great way to have a look at the data.
So the online audience were correcting me now. I'll read it out because it's a really good correction. I said earlier, Richard, you mentioned go try out DOORS Next Generation on jazz.net. You forgot to mention the online SaaS trial that you can make use of. And that's very true. There is a website, and I'll read it out. It's www.doorsng.com. DoorsNG, all one word, .com. and that's a hosted trial environment that you can make use of DNG.
And actually somebody told me yesterday, so this may be helpful, Jazz.net is a product demo, but don't expect great performance. If you want the performance, the real demo, go to doorsengine.com. That's where you'll actually get the service demo. That's what you can expect. Just for usability, Jazz.net, just to see how it works is quicker.
So I have a question from the room. I think maybe I'll paraphrase it, so Bonnie, forgive me. Have any of you got any idea about data topology in Doors Next Generation? How much data do you currently have? How much data do you expect to have over what time frame? And what's the data?
So we've been using it in anger for about the 6 months, and then all of the trial data we put in before. And so we just hit the object ID 1 million, rolled over onto that. Based on that, we're projecting to within 2 years to 5 million. But that's our best guess at this stage, and so we're now trying to scale our servers appropriately to manage that sort of object ID count. That said, not all of those object IDs are actually active data, but yeah, that's roughly where we're at with our object counts.
Anybody else want to talk about that?
So
I can answer a little bit about that as well. There are some technical notes on developer works about scalability testing of the Jazz-based products, and it quotes a figure, I think it's 2.5 or 5 million indexes that Doors Next Generation can support today. Now I'm a product manager. There's caveats on here saying something changes and all that sort of stuff, but we have got some very firm plans to multiply that by at least 10. So to have 50 or even 100 million artifacts in a requirement server, and be able to have multiple requirement servers that all communicate to the same central Jazz foundation. So you have one place to manage your licenses, one place to manage your users, one place to manage your team areas and your access rights, but then have multiple requirement servers that can connect into that. So I think key for scalability for me is to know that it's what these guys said. Doors Next Generation and the rest of the Jazz-based products are continuing to move. So we're very confident that within reason, the products will grow up in terms of scale faster than you do. If you try and bombard data into the tool, I've not got customers that are not, but you try and bombard data, you're bound to find problems. Okay, but if you simply take a stepwise transition to deploying Doors Next Generation to your users, IBM are very confident to support your spec. I'm not sure I understand this next question. It's a bit of a long one. So if I get it wrong, I apologise. There's a customer in the room that uses DXL and DXL attributes to run checks to make sure that their requirements are okay. And it's talking about being able to review proposed changes to requirements before you actually adopt them. Do any of you have a process in Doors or Doors Next Generation that does that, i.e. reviewing data before you deploy it into a live stream?
So I think, yeah, and in Doors Next Generation, change sets allow you to do that. We've been using change sets, essentially propose changes for users to enter in what they would like changed. At the end, you can either compare change sets or you can actually review them before they're delivered. So in that sense, it's a review check before you actually deliver them back to what they call the stream, which is your ongoing current baseline.
And so I was just to say, so in the Doors 9 space, we have taken the change proposal system that's built in, and we've basically enhanced it. So the change proposal system would be my recommendation, as opposed to just dropping in additional proposed attributes, because that's what it was designed for. You can propose changes, and it creates links back, such that you could have multiple changes going against the same requirement if needs be. We did develop additional DXL to help us do additional spot checking, We even have DXL that pumps information out into other formats like Excel and HTML, such that you could, for those of you that are maybe using additional tools on top of doors, and if you want to see kind of the red lines from too. But so we've just enhanced the built-in change proposal system for Doors 9.
Again, I can also recommend the RTC integration. You may actually be able to use one of your Doors licenses and put it on JAS and use the functionality. You may not actually have to purchase RTC to do it, but RTC can be tightly coupled. When that module is under change control, everything has to be proposed and reviewed and linked to a work item before a change can go in. It does exactly what the person asking wants.
Absolutely. We've had great success with RTC and Doors as well. Just like you said, the one thing to be aware of is if you want to use that integration, you have to have Doors Web Access as well, just to allow the tools to talk to one another.
I should add to that. So if as a Doors customer you wish to use Doors Web Access for integration purposes, you already own it. So you can install Doors Web Access without any Doors Web Access licenses, and you'll get the OSLC interface. Just take care if any of your users do start actually running Doors Web Access and you have no licenses, it'll start consuming your full Doors licenses, so it'll be a kind of expensive use of Doors Web Access. But you can install it for OSLC purposes without any license. I have a question here. If I paraphrase this one, it basically says, can you see into the future? But I'll read the question out. It says, have you got any tips about what you now know about deploying Doors Next Generation that you wish you'd known before you started?
Yeah, powerful server infrastructure, especially when you're going from Doors 9. The Doors 9 system requirements are piddly compared to DNG, but you get a lot of capability with DNG. Again, my first exposure was going with about 70,000, 80,000 requirements from Doors 9 to DNG, and we did not have an adequate server. And so it didn't take long for performance complaints to come in. So do budget for that server. That is the biggest piece of advice I can give.
So the biggest ones that I learned from this, use a reverse proxy and don't put any of the applications on the same server. So one just for Doors Next Gen, one just for the JTS, one just for QM, and have good links and fast disks, particularly for the index. Make sure that is on the fastest disk that you can provide at a machine if you want good performance.
Absolutely. I definitely agree with that. And make sure you have a WebSphere expert if you've never used WebSphere before. And then also make sure whatever database you use that you have a database expert. You know, don't just use DB2 just because it's what's available. Use whatever database you have an expert in. That way you can always troubleshoot if you need to.
Yeah, and I mean, again, I'm on the end user side, so I really love having the benefit of an IT team. So if you're going to bring this in-house, make sure that IT works with IBM and gets it right, because as an end user, there's nothing that's more frustrating than trying to type in what I'd like to do and just having it kind of freeze and like, where's my text? So that's very frustrating. So make sure you have good connection.
I guess a pro tip on the database is I actually say if you can convince your IT folks, go with DB2. There's one reason. When something happens in your Doors Next Gen or RTC, what you do, you open a ticket with IBM, right? And then you work with them to fix it. Well, the developers do that with Oracle and Microsoft. If there's a database issue with one of the drivers for Oracle and Microsoft, and if there's a bug, then they have to open those tickets. Well, they do it with DB2 too, but the DB2 and IBM developers are in the same company, and they sometimes across the hall from each other. So your DB2 issues may actually get resolved much faster. Actually, I should say will get resolved faster. So if you can justify using DB2 instead of Oracle or SQL, I recommend that.
Okay, thank you. I should add. One of the reasons behind Doors Next Generation was having a server infrastructure. We had very, very firm requests from our customers to say that they wanted to sit their tools on standard IT infrastructure. They didn't want to, and sorry guys, because I know some of you qualify for this, but they didn't want to recruit somebody that had to have Doors administration experience to deploy a tool. They wanted to put it into a commercial database. They wanted to put it behind a recognized technology application server. They wanted to have standard IT facilities, and that comes at a cost, not just a physical cost, but it comes at a cost because the doors server, as Kevin said, is trivial. It doesn't do very much at all, and it's really easy and quick to deploy. Deploying things on top of a relational database and those other things does have an overhead. But saying that, you should already have IT guys that have that experience. You go to your IT guys and say, I've got this new product called Doors and it's going to have this server. They're going to go, well, where's the relational database? You go to them with Doors Next Generation or one of the other Jazz tools and say, I've got this tool and it sits upon something called a relational database. And they'll say, oh yeah, sure, we use Oracle or we use DB2. They'll have the skills already in-house. So that's a huge benefit. I'm going to take you back towards the beginning that we were talking about configuration management. When I talk to audiences and I talk about configuration management, I quite often see a glazed look come across most of the people in the audience. And the trick with configuration management is to look for those people that don't have the glazed look. Everybody's interested in it, but there's going to be a couple of people that actually get it, and they're the people that are going to deploy it in your organizations. So are there any guidance you can have in terms of when you throw that big button that says, yes, we'll use configuration management, how do you approach it? Is it just as simple as, well, just turn it on, work? Or have you got any guidance of how you approach configuration management?
I think it requires, a lot of upfront training before you enable it. Definitely read the disclaimer to realize everything that you're agreeing to when you enable it, because once you enable configuration management, of course, you can't go back. But it's extremely powerful. My recommendation would be to use bits and pieces of it at first so you don't get overwhelmed and confused. If you start with a stream and you branch off another stream and you have a change set and baselines and you're using global configuration on top of that, it's going to get really confusing. Versus if you start with just a stream and you start with an initial baseline, it's a really easy way to start, and then you may throw out a change set and throw some changes in it and see how it works. It's a much easier way to start, just to ease into it. I think people get overwhelmed because there are so many options. It's extremely powerful, but you don't have to use them. So don't be afraid just to use what you're comfortable with in the beginning.
Yeah, I think one of the things that's helped me is that because we do kind of have a product line capability inside Doors now, and so the programs that I work with, I kind of say, like, here's the limited architecture we've come up with DXL, and here's the comparable DNG streams. So the idea is that when people see it, they're like, oh, wow. So they should get excited and really want to learn. So that's helped me to really, not just with configuration management, but in general other topics in DNG. I try and relate it back to the Doors 9 user and say, hey, this is how we used to do it, and here's the comparable feature and function, and that makes it a lot easier for those that are coming from Doors 9.
I want to say part of the answer should be piloting it, but the issue is if you have an established Doors Next Gen project and say you're using RQM, you can't do, like, you can't just say, okay, well, I'm going to start with a stream. You have to almost jump into global configuration to prove that it all works. So if you can just say, we're only going to focus on Doors for, say, maybe this week, but that's not always realistic. If you pilot it, you can at least show a proof of concept that you can set up a global config first, and then maybe talk them through local configuration so that they really understand the concept. They're not going to understand global configuration without understanding local, and it would be great if we lived in this perfect world, but I have many key users that have to, their focus is the testing, and they live with the requirements, and I can't just turn on global, I can't turn on configuration management without them all in, and it's a problem.
I'll kind of finish that with just some statements of fact. Configuration management is complex. There's no hiding it. All right, it's complex. It's not requirements configuration management complex. It's setting up over any types of data, anything. It's been around for a long time. It's software assets, right? So in the Jazz product, you get two opportunities that you have to think about. First of all, is your organization in a position to adopt configuration management at all. Right? And so you have to go through the decision-making process to say, yes, we're ready. Somewhere in our organization, we're ready to adopt configuration management. And when you make that decision, on your Jazz server, there's an advanced property that you have to throw to say, we're ready. Right? And to throw that option, you have to go to our support site to generate a code to switch it on. There's no license fee. It's just some checks to make sure you appreciate the flag you're throwing. Once you've said, as an organization, we're prepared to do configuration management, per program, per project, you enable configuration management. It's called opting in to configuration management. Now these barriers are put in place simply to help you make that decision. Okay? Because once you apply configuration management to data, there's no going back. Okay? I've got to stress this. Don't pick up the phone to support and say, hey guys, I've just pushed this button and stuff has happened. How do I go back to get back? There is no going back. As soon as you start down path of configuration management for a project, it is configured. Okay? You can't turn it off. And traditionally, when you do this with requirements, tests, software assets, traditionally, if you get your configuration management topology wrong, it's really tough to fix it. It's really tough to say, no, I didn't mean to do it that way. So, the benefits you can get from configuration management are truly massive, right? They are truly enormous. And if you want to get those benefits, then just take your time about it. Approach it in a stepwise process. Don't just throw the flag, throw it over the fence and say, great, we're done. Because it'll end in tears. Some of yours and some of mine. I've actually run out of questions here, so I'll just ask one more time if the audience in the room has got some more questions. Okay, so we have run out of questions, so I think maybe we'll come to an end then. This is the first time I've done this strange thing of having an online meeting at the same time as a physical one. I've attended one and I've looked at the schmuck at the front that's hosting it and thinking, oh, I don't want to be him. So hopefully it's worked. We'll find out what the feedback is in the room once we've disconnected the online webinar. And if anybody on the phone wants to give us your feedback about how we could do it better in the future, please do. We appreciate, we had a few technology glitches in terms of audio, so my apologies about that. I'm so happy the camera's a long way away, not too close, to see the little red lines of jet lag in my eyes. So I'd like to thank you all for coming in the room, and I'd like to thank you all for coming online, but we'll close the meeting just now. So thank you.